Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to do a presentation on a well-rounded sisterhood. You're going to hear some bird sounds in the background. It's a tool I like to utilize whenever I'm giving presentations or leading a meditation space, just because when birds make noise, it means we're safe. And so I love that primal instinct, so I feel confident in giving presentations. So, what does it take to have a successful sisterhood? So, since I'm giving this presentation after OLA, I want you to dig deep and think through these questions I'm going to ask. I'll leave a little bit of space for you to be able to reflect on each question. The QR codes are still up. However, it's a poll everywhere, so it's best utilized when giving a presentation. If you would like to utilize this to ask your friends in your chapter or make it part of your chapter meeting and you want to learn more about creating a poll everywhere, please reach out because this is a really great tool to get immediate feedback and you can show it on the screen while you're presenting. So, I wanted to hear from the people in this presentation. More importantly, I want to hear from all chapters on how they would rate their current status of their chapter sisterhood. This would be on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest. I want you to really dig deep and think about how are you feeling? How would you actually rate your experience in your sisterhood? Awesome. As background, when I was inactive, I probably would have rated my experience, my first active semester, as a 3. I didn't feel super connected or that I knew my place specifically. And it took my big being there for me and other people in my lineage once my big studied abroad to really like loop me back in and make me feel connected. And eventually it got to a 5 because I'm still here. And so we can use this as a tool to reflect on where do we think we are now and how do we think we can get to a 5 if we're not there. If you are there, amazing. Think about how you can get others to the same space that you are. So now I ask, what is a sisterhood? And also, what does it mean to be a sister to someone? So on that same poll everywhere, this would have been the second question. You can also utilize this for your first chapter meeting. If you want to pose to your chapter to define what is sisterhood to them and also what does it mean to be a sister, it's a great way to set that expectation for the rest of the semester. But take a moment, reflect. Awesome. Now I give you a definition, but not the only definition. So, sisterhood can be defined as sisterhood is a term that is used to group women together. Within it comes the importance of respect, friendship, gratitude, and honesty. Being a sister to someone is embodying all of these components to make someone feel at home. How do you feel with that definition? Does it feel all encompassing? Does it feel like anything is missing? Does it really describe what you think sisterhood can be defined as? I do want to note that we are an organization filled with more than the heteronormative standard of a woman or those who identify as women. We are a sisterhood filled with binary folks, male identifying folks, and more. Why is this important? So it is unique because it ties to everything that you do. We are a sisterhood, so choosing projects that align with people's values, having events that create opportunities for connection, and creating spaces for sister to see different cultures, cultivating spaces of inclusion, and more is all sisterhood. When this isn't done correctly and people are left feeling that one of these things aren't being given to them, your sisterhood gets flaky and shaky. Those are my two favorite rhyming words because it can have a serious impact on the culture that you choose to put yourself in. Not only with OFIA, but also in your workplace, in your home life. If things aren't balanced, it gets flaky and it gets shaky. So, there are many pieces to sisterhood. One way to think about this is how can each sister feel whole? Think about that. It's important to think, what is that sister going through? There's so many intersectionalities within a human being, and it's important to recognize that when you're asking this human to show up, do service, do sisterhood commitments, get leadership, hopefully get some diversity experience, everything in between. You also have to think about what other intersections is happening in their life. Now, I want you to think, what big buckets do you think of when you hear sisterhood? So take a moment. This would have been the last question on the poll everywhere. So please feel free to utilize this at your chapter meetings if you would like to just do a quick poll. Gauge the room, hear their interpretation of what all of these are, and then utilize it to help improve your chapter. I'm going to give you a moment to think about it. Awesome. Okay. When I think of sisterhood, here are the large buckets. So I think of inclusion. I think of diversity. I think of culturally competent language and decisions. I think of compassion and empathy. I think of support. I think of investment and success. And I also think of evolution. Now that you've heard my buckets, are there any that I missed? Are there any that you think should have been here? Or are there any that you think should not be here? Take a moment to reflect on that as well. Awesome. So we talked a lot about what is sisterhood. Now let's reflect on what sisterhood is not. So take a moment and think about what you don't think of when you hear sisterhood, or what you definitely know sisterhood is not. One thing I automatically think of off the bat is sisterhood is not discriminatory. And because of that, I want to emphasize that we are a community of diverse individuals, not limited by religion, sex, gender orientation, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, etc. We welcome everyone, and we do so with warmth. So, what happens when your sisterhood is flaky? How do you fix that? Here are some things that I want you guys to consider, and hopefully there's some ideas and tools that will help you bounce back from that situation. But it's important to recognize that every situation is very different. What can you do to make things less shaky? I have 4 things that I think are great starts. It's not the end all be all, but it's a really great way to start and fix the problem. Number 1 is start over. It can be really scary, but look at what your chapter is doing now. And is there anything that's tradition, but it's hurting your sisters in the long run? Look at the language being used, how communication occurs, and is everything inclusive? If not, scrap it. And that's okay. It is okay to start over, and built up from something that is a foundation created around everyone in your organization now and what they need to thrive in that space. Number two, listen effectively. Sometimes your sisters are telling you legitimately what they want and what they need, but sometimes leadership isn't listening. And you could just be hearing what they're saying, but you're not actually listening to what they're saying. There's a huge difference. When you're listening, you are engaged. You're being solution based. You're getting their input and making sure you're understanding what they're saying to create a solution that works and that's sustainable. If you're just hearing, you're letting them vent, you take it and you say, cool, cool, and you keep it pushing and nothing changes. That is not what we want from our leadership. So, having positions that are able to be the bridge between actives and leadership is also super important, i.e., chapter wellness, which I'm a really big fan of. And so, if you don't have a chapter wellness position, I definitely think you should get one because it is that liaison and that catalyst between actives and between leadership. And it really makes sure you're getting that feedback that you need outside of having an anonymous feedback form. Number three, have fun. Your students, yes. And that can get stressful. This isn't meant to add burden to your lives, but rather make it more exciting and help you to find like-minded people that value service just as much as you. Sometimes it can get super wrapped into just doing the service, which is amazing, but we are also a sorority. So do projects that bring out people's strengths, have sisterhood events that people truly enjoy, and make events like retreat fun and exciting. Essentially bring the joy back. If you feel like a chapter just isn't having fun, they're not excited to go to anything, it might be because they don't feel the joy. They aren't excited to be there. So how can you fix that? And if that is really scary for you, please reach out because I love brainstorming on ways to make things more interactive, make it more fun. And it's really important to have the feedback and input of your chapter so that it feels like this event was tailored for them. Number four, make sisters feel appreciated. So this can be holding diverse events that show the representation of all your members. As we all know, representation really matters in everything that you do. Having an honor you pass around every chapter. At my chapter, which is Kai chapter, huge shout out, we had Izzy and we passed her around at the end of every chapter, just highlighting something amazing that somebody else was doing. You can do spotlights on sisters who are killing the game or having sisters support at their events. For example, thesis presentations. It can be really slow at a thesis presentation. And so as you're giving that, seeing that your sisters show up for you is amazing. And it'll just give them even more confidence in the amazing humans that they already are. So now let's talk about conflict resolution and how does that actually make a difference? As you may or may not have experienced, having an organization that's filled with a lot of female identifying folks can sometimes get drama filled. This is okay. It can be resolved, but the way to do it is what can get a little tricky. It sometimes can be hard to know when as leadership you should intervene. Sometimes sisters live together or they belong to the same friend groups outside of OFIA, and then the drama comes into it. I love to practice 3, 2, 1. 3 times to hear about the issue before intervening. 2 times to get verbal warnings to the parties, hear both sides, etc. And then 1 more issue after the 2 warnings is when CSB should be involved. And then depending on the severity, it might immediately just go to the National Standards Board. And in those cases, the National Standards Board is when one of our national policies is violated, it automatically goes to nationals. So it takes that weight off of your shoulders. You can also utilize Mediator in a box. A couple of years ago, they were sent out to all of the chapters, and it's a really cool tool. It almost looks like a board game where it gives you a prompt of how to facilitate mediation between two individuals. And that also helps you work out your issues. You can also reach out to your chapter health specialist if you've been assigned one, or you can reach out to me, your chapter health manager, so I can help you facilitate these problems and we can work through it. So this next part was thinking through some scenarios. It can be really easy to say you're going to be able to deal with conflict management until you have the issue put in front of you and you're trying to think about what to do. So hopefully this allows you to reflect a little bit and think a little bit more on what you would do in these situations and hear a little bit of my feedback in regards to these situations. So scenario 1. And we're going to use the name Stephanie. So during Stephanie's first active semester, they're having their annual service event, 5K for veterans. While attending, she noticed that only half of the members who signed up actually showed up to the event. The next day at chapter, the service director yelled at the chapter about how embarrassing it was that no one shows up to anything and how she hates this chapter because everyone sucks. Stephanie chimes in and also yells at the chapter, saying, "Why are you even here if you aren't going to do anything?" They both storm out the meeting. Take a moment, reflect. Think about what you would do if you were an active just in this meeting, or if you were the president in this meeting. What would you do? Take a moment. Awesome. So, things to notice. 1, what is now happening with your sisterhood? You're in the middle of a meeting, abrupt disruption. Everybody's been yelled at, and they fled. Your sisterhood is shattered. Why would anybody want to show up to service if they were just accosted, essentially, for not attending? Or if they did attend, they still got the same yell as the people who didn't, and it makes them feel undervalued. That's number 1. Number 2, got some anger management issues, but we also have a lack of respect for the position holder in your chapter and the work that they're doing. It is very common for chapters to struggle with members committing fully to the service that they sign up for, and even the service that they attend, doing it to the best of their ability. However, there are ways to hold members accountable, which Alexa actually has a wonderful presentation on this. And so after this, you can review that one just so you have more insight on how to hold your members accountable. But as president, I would recommend definitely partnering up with your VP, having your VP to go after the 2 members who left while you take control of the space and you kind of recenter everyone. You can do a meditation activity. You can apologize for the outburst on behalf of your fellow exec board member. And you can say, "I'm so sorry that happened to you guys. I would love for us to be resituated in this space so we can finish our chapter meeting." And you can do a quick meditation. You can also choose to end the chapter meeting and then move forward later on. There are different ways to do this, but something to definitely always consider is to make sure that you're making sure your sisterhood is intact and that people feel so connected and they don't feel disrespected. Next is scenario 2. So it's year 3, and Stephanie is now the vice president. She's moved on up. They're at their annual formal, and her 2 best friends in the chapter show up drunk. They're taking shots from the mini bottles they brought in. They're getting very rowdy, and they're knocking the food over. When someone goes up to them, they run away and say they think they're going to throw up. People come up to Stephanie to ask her what she's going to do about the situation. Since they are her friends, she tells them to knock it off and goes back to enjoying herself. At the standards board, someone brings up the incident and says they should be disassociated. Stephanie ignores the suggestion and proceeds with the meeting. So, soak this in. It's a lot. I want you to think a little bit about what Stephanie could have done better and maybe what some other exec board members could have done to support in this space. Take a moment and think this one out. Awesome. So I hope I didn't rattle you too much. I know it was a lot. So things to consider. 1, Stephanie is struggling with doing her role as a vice president. In that instance, it's a really great job for the president to step in and say, hey, I noticed that you're struggling to deal with this situation. How about I deal with it and we proceed from there? That way, we can make sure that the 2 members that are drunk, A, that they are safe and taken care of, and B, that it's recognized that because this is a national policy violation, it immediately goes to the National Standards Board, so it wouldn't be her to even make this decision in the first place. There is also definitely a need to make sure to protect those 2 friends that were drunk. You don't want it to be a target put on their back or anything like that. You want to make sure that they still feel supported even though they're not doing the right thing in that moment. They need to be safe, and that's a really important priority to have. And it's also up to Stephanie to know when she can no longer do her role, right? Whenever you're taking on a role, it's important to understand the responsibility that comes along with it. And that's part of your sisterhood. You want to make sure that people you're representing your active chapter and that they, the people that elected you, they feel like you're capable and you are doing your role to the best of your ability and the way that they believed you could. And so all of this ties into sisterhood because it's important. All right, we thought through some scenarios. Hopefully I didn't take you through the ringer. Now, we're going to think about what are ways that your chapter creates a safe sisterhood for all members. I want you to think about some innovative ways that your chapter has done that. Take a moment. Awesome. So now, let's dive into these larger buckets of sisterhood. First, let's talk diversity. So, as an organization, we do not discriminate against anyone. Men are allowed. Any person is allowed in this organization. Non-binary folks, queer folks, men, women, whoever. Anyone that wants to be a part of this organization is allowed to join. That's what makes us special. So, something to think about is that as you get more diverse, you have a responsibility for you all to educate yourself on how to be a sister and a friend to everyone. This is reflected in the language that you choose, the events you choose to put on, what you choose to acknowledge happening in the world, and how you speak to one another. All of it is connected. And it's important to understand that inclusivity can also look like including a diversity chair in leadership, making sure to use pronouns when you're conducting recruitment, and making sure you recognize those pronouns throughout that member's experience in your chapter. And then lastly, you can partner with the multicultural office on your campus for trainings. It's really great if you do have one of these offices on your campus. Most likely you definitely do, because they're already putting on programming that you can benefit from. They're usually already conducting trainings, or they have somebody on their staff that is able to come to your chapter meetings or come to a different time that you schedule to give a session, to give a training so that you're able to educate yourselves more on how to be a better sister to your members. So, something to remember is that it isn't just race and it isn't just service. Diversity itself is actually an acronym. It stands for different individuals valuing each other regardless of skin, gender, intellect, talent, or years. Please make sure that you're being accessible in an equitable way for your service opportunities, your sisterhood events, any required events you have, and in the way that your resources are shared and your overall atmosphere. You can share resources, but if members aren't being equitable in the way that they communicate or even the way that they engage with maybe a member who needs a little extra support or who doesn't look like them, it doesn't create a wonderful sisterhood atmosphere that you're wanting to have members that are continuously engaged and that are retaining in your chapter. It's so important to make diversity a priority. A major way to do this, like I mentioned, is to have a diversity officer or chair that's in leadership. Now, this role, it can look like highlighting and connecting with your on-campus multicultural office events, hosting diversity trainings for your chapter, whether that's annually or every semester, hosting culturally competent learning opportunities for members, highlighting important holidays for all cultures and how to be an advocate. For example, you can make sure to have an event on Halloween on how not to appropriate for your Halloween costumes. That's a really great event to have. You can also host diversity chats within your chapter to improve your chapter's knowledge around topics. And you can also obtain a chapter certification on a diversity topic. One way to do this is Safe Zone Ally Training. This is really good to support the LGBTQIA community that we have. We have a really large community in OFIA, and so it's important to recognize how to be a friend to that member because it's important. And you can be chapter certified or it can be individually certified, but since it's a training, it would count as service. And then a huge note, this isn't the opportunity to target all the minorities in your chapter. Please remember that it isn't their job to be the spokesperson of their marginalized identity. Now, let's talk support. Being a member of a Magna Phi Alpha isn't anyone's only identity. And so you have to hold space for intersectionality because it's also understanding that life happens and sometimes things can really affect sisters. Whether it's good or it's bad, it's important to have a system in place for supporting everyone. The easiest way to do this is to have a chapter support committee. This can be your exec board, it can be members of the chapter that are anonymously selected, etc. They can make sure that things are recognized and sisters feel supported in the capacity that they would prefer. So what can this chapter support committee look like? So you can use a Google form where sisters can submit when support is needed. And the questions can include who needs support. And you ask that question in particular if the person that needs support isn't submitting it. If another sister notices that sister's going through a really rough time, they might be submitting the report. You can say what happened. This is not needing a book novel, but rather saying something bad happened, or they could just say a sister is really struggling. They don't have to give the whole life story. It's just knowing whether good support is needed or bad support is needed. Next is what they would like to see done. So whether that is, if it's something good, maybe you create a certificate to highlight them, or you give them a moment during chapter. If it's something not so good, maybe you have a teddy bear and a written note from everyone on the committee. You know, different things that you can do to just show support to that sister that really might need it. Lastly is, are you okay if we contact you for more details and information? For some situations, it might be very serious, and they might not be able to continue, and that's okay. But it's important to support that sister regardless. And so if that kind of situation unfolds, it's really important to wrap your love around them if they're willing to accept it and they're comfortable with it. And then lastly, just a reminder, the person who needs support or someone else can submit the form. And then in your budget, you can actually create a space to be able to provide these items, or you can designate it to a specific position holder as part of their budget role. Next is investment in success. So being a part of a PA, it should allow for you to grow as a leader. And so I want you to think, does your chapter have opportunities that invest in this? Do you feel like you have leadership development or personal growth opportunities, learning about your personality style, your strengths, etc.? And if you do, I want you to think. And if you're doing this with your whole chapter, this viewing, then share it to someone beside you. If not, I want you to just reflect. Awesome. And now let's talk about how you can make leadership a priority. So the president actually serves as the liaison for leadership if a leadership chair or officer isn't elected in your chapter. So this role, it can include providing trainings to improve leadership of all members, hosting workshops to set sisters up for success. I listed some here, including a LinkedIn workshop, a resume / CV building workshop, interviewing skills, headshots, building a brand, goal setting, vision board making, networking events, and this can be with actives, with other organizations on campus, or with alumni. And then lastly, you can also do a conference attendance for some of your members. I know when I was president of my undergraduate chapter, we paid for a member to be able to go to the Student Leadership and Diversity Conference. And so there are different ways that you can utilize your funds to really invest in sisters. Let's talk evolution and these 3 I's. So why must we evolve, right? Why is it important? So the 3 I's: inclusion, improvement, integration, right? So inclusion, it's really important to update the terminology and implicit bias that can occur for people. It is some people's first interaction with diversity. You know, we got to recognize that, but it's not an excuse. It should be motivation for them to step up and be a better sister. Improvement. Having ways for everyone to contribute their perspective is essential to retaining an awesome chapter. People's experiences could be the missing piece needed for a successful semester, year, or chapter as a whole. You never know. At the end of the day, perspectives help create a more inclusive and exciting outcome. And so it's really great if you're able to have all of these different perspectives when you're deciding on the things you want your chapter to do. Next, integration. So it's important to evolve to the world around you, but more specifically to the chapter, and it will allow for a better integration into chapter as a whole, especially coming from a new member to an active. If you're able to really continuously and intentionally integrate new members into the active position to make sure that they are evolving and blossoming into these roles, it'll be perfect. So let's talk about how can you do this now, right? I have 6 things for you. 1, you can have a chapter wellness event. Love those. And I actually have another presentation on chapter wellness events that goes a little more in detail. So please review that if you have any questions. Number 2, diversity and inclusion position holder. Yes, and events throughout the year. If you have someone that's constantly devoted to this, it makes it a lot easier to be inclusive and to think about diversity every step of the way and doing it equitably. Number 3, polling after major events to get feedback on how to improve. If you want to improve, Why not ask the people that you're doing these things for, right? It's great to get immediate feedback so then you're always able to provide that information for the next position holder, and then they can make sure to always improve. It's awesome. It's just great. Just keep continuously getting feedback so you can constantly make things in the eyes of the people you're trying to put it on for. Number 4 is a suggestion box that's anonymous. There are a lot of different ways to do this, but one way in particular is to make sure that you have space for people to leave tangible solutions. It shouldn't just be event session, but rather if people have an issue, they have a solution to fix it, because that makes it easier when you're doing constructive feedback. You want to make sure it's objective and not subjective. You want to really ensure that people are able to improve their position. And if you're being a sister to someone, you want to make sure they have all the support and guidance they need to be able to do a task. Number 5, town hall meetings as a chapter when needed. So town halls are great because it's similar to a chapter wellness event where you're able to vent and say what's needed to be said, etc. Except it has less structure around the pillars and it's more of an open forum. So that's the difference between those two. And if it gets to a place where you feel like you need a town hall, you totally can do that. So it's really whatever works best for your chapter. Number 6 is you can also open exec board meetings once a month for active members to attend. It allows for them to have a direct connection to exec board if they want to ask everyone something at the same time, or if they want to like specifically ask a position, get feedback on something, etc. And it's really great for your transparency. If you do have a wonderful transparent view, and that's how your chapter views you guys, it makes it a lot easier for them to want to come to you about things. And you might not even have as many people using the anonymous feedback box because they feel comfortable coming to you, which is super important. Now, let's connect it back to you. So, how can you play your part in being a sister and an officer in a beneficial way for all? It sounds made up, but it's not. It's definitely possible, and we can talk a little bit about how. So, being a sister while in a leadership role is tricky, but it's definitely possible. It's important to remember that having a position is a commitment, and it's to ensure that the chapter runs smoothly for everyone. When you're not doing your part, it has a trickle-down effect that ultimately ruins people's perspective and experience. So, how can you be helpful as a position holder? 1, respond to each other in a timely manner. Respond to active members, respond to each other on exec board. It's really great if you set expectations of what you want those time commitments to be of people responding back to you. 2, be respectful to each other in the way you provide feedback and communicate in general. It's really great if you are able to know how people take feedback, like what their feedback style is or their conflicts, or conflict management style, their leadership style. All these things really go into thinking about how people will accept feedback and how they even take criticism as a whole. Number 3, don't waste each other's time. It's really important to prioritize each other's time because you're college students, you're busy. And college and OFA isn't anyone's only two identities. There are people who work, there are people who are in the lab doing research, there are people who are on scholarships, and the only way they're here and they have obligations with those. So it's really important to understand that that's not anyone's two identities. Other people have things going on. So please don't waste each other's time and prioritize what needs to get done first and let people go. Like if everything's complete, let them go ahead and leave rather than chit chat. 4, listen to each other's ideas. No one's opinion is greater than the others. It's really great if you are able to have an enormous amount of feedback because that's going to help make a solution that's tangible and sustainable for your chapter. You don't want to have to, every year someone new is elected, keep implementing new things. If something works for your chapter and you figured it out, that's great. It makes that person's role easier. And so making sure you're listening to other people's ideas is going to help create that kind of environment. 5, let's not discourage anyone from doing their best. If they're doing their best, I think it's really important to validate and make sure that they feel supported in their role, which ties into number 6, which is support and encourage each other. It ties so closely with number 5, but it's so important. If people don't feel supported, if they don't feel encouraged, if they don't feel validated in the work they're doing, they won't want to keep holding a leadership position. And that's usually when chapters run into the issue of having people run for leadership positions. Number 7, reach out when you need help. Please don't suffer in silence. And so this includes all of your executive board as a whole. This includes your members. This includes you in your position. You have resources. And so it's really important to utilize them and make sure you know where they're located. OPA Portal is your hugest resource. You also have myself, you have Alyssa, our chapter health specialist, and the numerous other national team members. We're all here to support you. And so please feel free to utilize us if you feel like you aren't comfortable or don't know what to do in your role. It all connects. So how you treat each other in your leadership roles, it really serves as an example of how well you work together. This shows chapter if you are a unit or if you're a mess. Being on a team or board means working together to get the job done. It does not mean one person doing everything to make sure it gets done. Partner with that doesn't mean micromanaging. So hold your weight and take responsibility for the role you sign up for. And if you don't know what you're doing, that is a-okay. Just ask for help. Ask other members of your exec board, ask previous position holders, ask us, ask OPA Portal when you review these OLA workshops and you review all these other resources we have for you. The answer is in front of you and it's there. It's just in a different avenue than you thought, and that's fine. But just utilize your resources. Working together shows that sisterhood can exist at the top and it trickles down to all of chapter. You're showing that representation that is so important. And so remember that sisterhood is strength. You all are so powerful, intelligent, and remarkable. When you are that together, it's a force to be reckoned with. That is my last slide, and I'm so excited for everybody to review this presentation. It's so important to think about your sisterhood in all elements because it truly all connects with your chapter. Everything is interconnected, and it's important to think of it that way, and I'm so excited for you to get started with your semester. Thanks.